Welcome, fellow freaks, geeks, and nostalgic peeps, to my channel, Slime and Slashers, where, yeah, we talk about everything, from Nickelodeon slime to horror movie slashers, but plenty of stuff in between, including books. But today's video, it is not a book-themed video. It is actually, finally, a nostalgia-themed video, because I'm really excited, guys. This video today will be my top 10 favorite creepiest, scariest kids movies list. So kids movies, aka movies appropriate for kids, or aka family movies. Movies that were appropriate for like PG audiences back in the day, but still, these movies that I'm talking about, they may be rated G or PG, but they're freaking creepy as hell. That's what they all have in common. A lot of them are from the 80s and 90s. There are some a bit older, there are some a bit newer, maybe in the honorable mentions, we will see. Anyway, without further ado, let's go to this little short intro, then we can come back and we'll get into all the creepy, spooky eeriness. Welcome back, guys! As I said, this is my personal top 10 favorite scariest kids movies list. So I have to do it in parentheses so you guys don't think that I'm talking about creepy kids or scary kids in movies. It's movies that are referred to as kids movies, which are just movies I watched as a kid that are meant for kids and made for kids, appropriate for family members, but these specific movies on my list are actually quite eerie, scary, and in some ways, some of these movies have scarred me and left a real mark. So we will get into it. I don't have any particular order that I'm going through in this list. I will be going through 10 movies, but again, it's not like necessarily number 10, number 9, number 8 in my mind in terms of, I think this is the number 10 creepiest or the number 9 creepiest. These are just a list of 10 movies and they all creep me out. They all have scared me back in the day when I was a kid, and some of them, when I have rewatched them, still scare me and creep me out to this day. And that's saying something, because I am an experienced horror reader and horror watcher in terms of movies and TV, so yeah. Something that still creeps me out that's made for kids? That's insane. So anyway, I'm sure you guys might have heard of quite a few, if not all of the movies on my list, and we will go through and see if that is the case. Alright, the first movie I want to talk about will be dun, 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 The Brave Little Toaster from the year 1987. And honestly, on the surface, it looks just like a cute little story about these little appliances going on a little adventure. Oh yes, it's a toaster, he's all brave. No, that's not just what it's about. There's some scary elements, and it starts near the beginning with this air conditioner dude. He's an AC and he talks and he's got a mustache. I actually rewatched this scene when I was planning for this video. I've got a whole bunch of notes that I had to take down and plan for this. The AC legit freaks out on the other appliances and he's like, you think he likes you? And then he like freaking blows up, aka it's like the AC commits suicide. This is a kid's movie, what the hell is going on? So, by the way, if you have not seen it, trigger warning for that, for, you know, depiction of that, because as a kid, that part was frightening and really off-putting, and I didn't know what the hell was going on, but it was definitely apparent that the AC was freaking out and he was not happy. Like, that's an understatement. Alright, so the essential plot of the movie, according to, I think IMDb is where I got these descriptions, a group of dated appliances embark on a journey to the city to find their master after being abandoned in a cabin in the woods. So although this kids movie lands on my top 10 creepiest kids movies list, there is a really cute aspect to this movie, and it is the character of Blanky! He's so cute. Anyway, I just had to mention him because he's like my favorite little like cartoon character. I have not seen this movie in years, but I actually run an old school themed readathon and watchathon that takes place every year in the month of April. It is called Old School April. It will be happening in 2024. So if you guys have not participated already before in the past, join us. It'll be a lot of fun. I think one of the watch parties that I'll be showing on Discord will be The Brave Little Toaster. So just a heads up on that. That could be a lot of fun. If you haven't haven't seen it in a long time or if you've never seen it at all. So in addition to the creepy ass AC, we also have more creepy scenes. Specifically, there's this really scary dream sequence. The toaster has a nightmare and he is experiencing some toast burning inside of his toaster self, and he's like, ah, and all of a sudden things go up in flames. It's really, really scary. These firefighters come to put out the flames, but they're not regular firefighters. No, bitch, they're freaking clowns. Nobody wants to see you here putting out a fire. Clowns start fires in this nightmare scenario because the clowns look really evil, and there's a close-up of one of the clowns' faces, and he goes, run, and then like smoke billows out from his mouth and shit. Oh my god, it's so creepy. Hence why it lands on my creepiest movies list. Anyway, I do think that the blanket is extra cute. If I made like a top 10 cutest characters, I think blanket would be number one. There's this one dream sequence where he imagines the master is downstairs and he's like floating towards him and he's like, the master. He's so cute. He says master instead of master. He goes, the master. He's so cute. Anyway, it's on this list because of the creepiness, not because of the cuteness, but I can't help it. So yes, the AC, the creepy clown from the nightmare that says run, and then finally there is a song, and the song is taking place in this like repair shop, and the creepy ass appliances in the shop are all singing to the nice appliances, the toaster and his buds and Blanky and all that. They're like, yo, we're gonna use you for your parts. That's paraphrasing, but it's essentially very, very off-putting. The lyrics are essentially about them being gutted and used for their parts, and the tone of the entire movie at times is very creepy, but specifically that song, the tone is very heavy, very creepy, kind of like electronic, and just like, oh, we're gonna kill you for your parts. That's nothing like it. Just look it up. Like, I for some reason I don't remember the tune very much, but I do remember it was like techno-y and creepy. So yes, all good reasons why this movie should be on the list. And if you want to hear more creepy things or other opinions about The Brave Little Toaster, there is an article I found. I will link every article I found below because I found multiple articles for many movies on this list. The article I found about Brave Little Toaster is called 3 Reasons Why The Brave Little Toaster is the Most Frightening Movie Ever Made. And that was written by Mitch Roosh. So yes, I will have that article linked below. And like I said, I've got many more articles to reference throughout this whole thing. Next movie on my list, moving onwards. This one is more obscure. I'd be surprised if tons of people are familiar with this one besides me. My dad would always get me some really obscure VHS movies, and I just thought he was the best at picking out like random movies that weren't your just typical standard Disney movies, and this is one of them. So this one is Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland, and this is a really interesting movie in that American animators and foreign animators worked together, and it was actually done in an anime type of animation style, but it was released in the US here. The year this was released was 1989, the year of my birth. The essential premise: each night young Nemo goes to Slumberland and has adventures and befriends the king of Slumberland named Morpheus, but one night Nemo discovers Nightmare Land and the evil Nightmare King, throwing Slumberland and Nemo himself into danger. And I think just the depiction of Nightmare Land alone lands this movie on the list, but the Nightmare King is the creepiest part about this movie. He starts off as like this black goo, and he's stuck behind this creepy door, which has a creepy key that is the only key that can open this door, and it's very menacing. Every time you see this forbidden door, you get this eerie music. The tone is very, very strange in the entire movie. In fact, a lot of the movies on our list, they all have like very unsettling tones throughout the entire movie, or at least parts of the movie. And Little Nemo is no different. Like I said, the creepy door, the Nightmare Land, which you see at the beginning when he's on his way to Slumberland, they pass through Nightmare Land, or right by Nightmare Land, and it's off the bat really, really creepy. But finally, there is a part in the movie where they actually spend time in Nightmare Land, and that's when it gets really scary, and you see the Nightmare King, and he's got these creepy horns, and he's a big freaking demon-looking dude, and his voice is very off-putting and scary. The pictures really don't do it justice. When I was seeing this movie back at 8, it was terrifying, but you look at the picture of the Nightmare King now, it's not as terrifying as some of the other villains on my list here, or the movies containing like a little bit scarier villains. I still think the Nightmare King makes Little Nemo very, very scary. Next up, we've got All Dogs Go to Heaven, and this was also released in 1989. It's another animated movie. That is something that's very common on my list here, is lots of animated movies, because I think you can get away with doing more scary things in animated movies, especially back in the 80s and 90s. A lot of kids' programs, not just movies, kids' TV shows, kids' movies, everything like that, it was creepier. Even kids' books. We got Goosebumps. I'm wearing my Goosebumps earrings. Yeah, even kids' books were a little bit more creepy in my opinion. So I feel like kids' animated movies even took it a step further and really upped the creep factor. And there was, like I said, generally there was some creepiness even in live action stuff, but animation sometimes took it that extra mile. All Dogs Go to Heaven is about a canine named Charlie. He becomes an angel at one point, but then he sneaks back to Earth from heaven and ends up befriending an orphan girl who can speak to animals. In the process, Charlie learns that friendship is the most heavenly gift of all. Hee hee. A pun there, or whatever you call it. I don't even know if I'm using that word right. Anyway, there is an article about this movie as well, Why All Dogs Go to Heaven is the Most Disturbing Kids Movie Ever, by Hilary Busis. So I'm not the only one who thinks it is, quote, creepy. There's actually many examples in this movie. Firstly, it opens up in like a dog prison, and funnily enough, it's set in my hometown of New Orleans. There's also like a dog-run casino, so there's gambling, there's some allusions to prostitution, specifically with this one dog character, but not for very long. You really have to concentrate. As a kid, all of that went over my head. I didn't understand any of that. But yeah, in the beginning, Charlie and his cohort Itchy are escaping from this little prison, like I said, and then they go to the casino. They have to contend with this freaking Scarface dude who's like a creepy ass gangster mobster dog, and he really is really evil. He's a terrible villain, or maybe I should say he's a wonderful villain, because he's really, really good at being mean and evil. So yeah, he is quite the villain. So that's number one, why it's creepy, all those elements that I just named. But number two, later on in the movie, towards the end, where things get really, really creepy, there's this weird crocodile creature that Charlie and the little orphan, she and him come across this crocodile, and eventually the crocodile and Charlie, the dog, are like, cool. But at first, the crocodile is like gonna eat them. Then they start singing, Charlie and this crocodile start singing, "Let's make music together. Let's make sweet harmony." That is the tune of the song. I actually do remember this one, unlike the Brave Little Toaster, but the song is a little off-putting because it's like the crocodile is almost hinting at that it wants to sleep with Charlie. He's like, "Let's make sweet harmony." And the reason he doesn't eat Charlie is because he likes the sound of Charlie, the dog's voice. He's like, "Ooh, I love your voice." It's like all creepy and suggestive. Anyway, there's a lot of questionable, like, creepy, suggestive things in this movie. And finally, there's a lot of hell type of imagery depicted. So literal hellish imagery depicted in this movie. First off, Charlie has a dream, and he like dreams that like this like hellish boat is coming to get them, with like hellish demons and hellish skeletons on the boat. I don't remember that scene very much, but fast forward all the way to the end, there is this demon who sweeps over the entire city. It's all red, and the demon goes, "Charlie, Charlie." Yeah, the demon itself at the end, I think, is the scariest part, and that part always got me, with the voice saying Charlie all menacing like that. So yeah, if you haven't seen All Dogs Go to Heaven, it is an underrated animated movie in my opinion. It's a movie directed by Don Bluth, who created his own animation studio. He branched off. He used to work at Disney. So a lot of people think Don Bluth movies are Disney movies, but they are not. So a lot of Don Bluth movies tend to be darker on the whole than Disney movies. Don Bluth was not afraid to go there, and he frequently went there. Trust me, like in All Dogs Go to Heaven, literal multiple depictions of demons throughout the movie. Next up, another Don Bluth movie on my list, The Secret of Nim from 1982. And this was Don Bluth's first big hit as an independent animator when he had his own studio, when he separated from Disney. Secret of Nim was a huge success. It got a lot of critical praise. In fact, I'll read you some stuff I found out about it online. It says here, the description, it is a 1982 American animated fantasy adventure film. and it was Don Bluth's directorial debut based on Robert C. O'Brien's 1971 children's novel, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim. To save her ill son, a field mouse, Mrs. Frisby, must seek the aid of a colony of rats with whom she has a deeper link than she originally suspected. So the movie was praised by critics for its elegant and painstakingly detailed animation, compelling characters, and deep and mature plot, and it won a Saturn Award for Best Animated Film of 1982. Though only a moderate success at the box office, it turned a solid profit through home video and overseas releases. And I will say, I did not see it in the theater, but I did have it on VHS. That's how I knew about this movie. And the things that made it really, really spooky and scary, I think, was just the darkness that was portrayed through the whole movie. You had definite allusions to experimentation on animals, specifically rats and mice, and you've got some creepy talking rats, especially this one evil rat near the end who literally wants to kill people and ends up having a sword fight, and he just looks so evil and mean. Mean's putting it a little bit lightly, but yes, he looks pretty ferocious, pretty mean. And also there's a big ass creepy owl. There's just like very dark and foreboding areas in the landscape that Mrs. Frisby has to go adventure to. And also there's a very creepy cat. It's like the most uncute cat ever animated. Like usually you have to work really hard to make a cat look ugly. They did a great job in this movie at making this particular animated cat look so ugly, totally not cute, and actually a little bit scary. But I don't think the cat's the scariest part. I do think that the evil mouse is one of the creepiest parts, and just the flashbacks to Nim and to the experimentation on the animals. And just the general tone is very bleak, very dark, and they are not afraid to allude to death, to allude to like some high stakes. Now, old school Disney did allude to death as well, if you think of Bambi and stuff like that. This is like Bambi on steroids, because like you're seeing death like and murder, and like it's pretty in your face, I think, in my opinion. You guys can always argue, not argue in a bad way, but you guys can debate with me in the comments. I'd love to hear if you don't think the movie should be on the list, or any of these movies, if they shouldn't be on the list. Tell me why, and tell me what should be on the list instead. I'd love to hear that down below in the comments. Next up, a movie that is also a little bit more obscure because it's a little bit older. The Hobbit. And no, I'm not talking about the Peter Jackson movies. The Hobbit movies. Not those. Those are live action. Those are lame in my opinion. I saw them all. And because I grew up watching the animated The Hobbit, the one that has landed on my creepiest kids movies list from 1977, that is why Peter Jackson's version of The Hobbit did not impress me, because I grew up watching this very creepy animated movie from the 70s. So in this one, there are many reasons why it is so off-putting, especially just a lot of the animation style of the bad characters. That's really the main reason why it's very, very creepy. I don't want to go through the scenario because I feel like you guys know the story of The Hobbit. We've got Bilbo. He goes on an adventure. He tries to help these dwarves recover this treasure. And the things that make this extra spooky, it's one of the greatest animated introductions of a villain. We've got Gollum, who is just always going after the ring. He's like, my precious, my precious. He's so attached to the ring, and then he winds up losing it and freaking out and really getting very scary because he just loses his mind when he cannot find the ring. And he's just very off-putting. Like at one point, this sentence doesn't seem like it would be like an eerie sentence, but the voice actor did a great job at making this sound spooky. Gollum is like, aches. And it's actually used in a song, that little sound clip. I think it's in a Horse the Band song, but I'm not actually 100% sure. I could be wrong, but definitely I've heard a band that I have the song on my iPod. It uses the clip, eggs, at the beginning of the song. And I'm like, oh, that's from The Hobbit, from, you know, the movie I used to watch from when I was a kid. So the goblins in the movie, the animated goblins, are hideous, so ugly, so scary looking. The animators did such a great job, way better job than Peter Jackson did in my opinion, making these creatures just look very, very scary. There's also the creepiest version of a spider maybe ever in any movie, animated or not animated. And also I personally think Smaug the dragon was very, very creepy in the animated movie because his voice was very, very menacing sounding, and maybe the voice added to it. There is an article I'll reference that actually said that Smaug in the animated movie is not scary. I I definitely disagree with that. I think that Smaug in this 1977 version is scary. Definitely more scary than the live action one, in my opinion. But yeah, the music is also depressing and a little bit unsettling and kind of hypnotic too. Yeah, a lot of things this movie has is just like over the top creepy. So there are 2 articles you could look up about this. One is just a Reddit thread. It's called Unpopular Opinion: The 1977 Hobbit cartoon is more fun to watch and scarier than the Peter Jackson versions. Then the second article, this is an actual legit article versus a Reddit thing. This one is The Hobbit cartoon from the 70s is pure Nightmare Town by Kyle Anderson. So I agree with Kyle. I do think it's pure Nightmare Town, and if you've never seen it, I do think it's better than the live action version, so give it a chance. Next on my list, another old school movie, The Witches. Yes, I mean the 1990 version and not the new remake that was released rather recently in the last couple of years. I have not even seen that version, and I don't feel the need to go and see that version because I love the original 1990 version so very much. Of course, this is based on a popular children's book, and the essential premise is, while staying at a hotel in England with his grandmother, Helga, young Luke inadvertently spies on a convention of witches. The Grand High Witch, played by Angelica Houston, reveals a plan to turn all children into mice through a magical formula. If you want to watch something and get into the mood for spooky season, I think that this movie is really, really perfect. I think it's even perfect to watch right before spooky season, like early September or late September, before you actually go, if you're someone who likes to go full-blown into watching horror movies during the month of October. I feel like The Witches could be a good precursor because it's not like, the same level of scary as an adult horror movie, but it's got some creepy elements in there, and the overall bleakness and tone of it is really, really appropriate to get you hyped for spooky season. So there is an article about this as well called The Original Version of The Witches is so much better than the new remake. It's a Thrillist article, and in that article it says, Robert Zemeckis' extra campy take on Roald Dahl's The Witches recently hit HBO Max. But if you're looking for something truly spooky to watch, go back to Nicholas Roeg's 1990 adaptation starring Angelica Houston. And this director, Roeg, I think that's how you say his last name, is the same director as the movie Don't Look Now, which is of course based on the Daphne du Maurier short story. Don't Look Now is a very off-putting horror drama movie, and so he wasn't really known for directing kids movies, so the fact that he then went and directed The Witches is kind of fun, and I think that's why the original, the 1990 version, has this kind of eerie undertone to it. So the article goes on to say, it's right there on Netflix and it's deeply unsettling in a way that the new film is most certainly not. If you want to revisit the horrors of childhood this Halloween season, give the old version a swing. Then it also says, that's not to say that the new take on the material doesn't have some scares, on top of a truly insane performance from Anne Hathaway, who is endeavoring to do the most at all possible times, but anything truly haunting is muddled by an over-reliance on CGI. The comparison between these two movies serves as a good reminder that more technology often doesn't equal more terror. I think that's the perfect way to sum it up, even though I have not seen the new version of The Witches. And the original movie, it's a lot about makeup and prosthetics, and they did such a great job. The thing that makes it scary is that you got Angelica Houston peeling off her human face and like turning it into witches. You got like witches bubbling like out of their skin. They've got really gross scalps. So the witches in the movie truly look scary. Now there is a cute factor to the movie that helps balance out the scary, which is how cute the little boy looks when he turns into a little mouse. I'm kind of biased because I had pet mice, so I really love him as a little mouse, and I feel like the movie is pro mouse. But overall, the witches alone, the design of them from the original, warrant it being here on the list. Now we are going back to talk about another animated movie. This one is Fern Gully from 1992. This villain is one of the best cartoon villains in any movie, Disney or non-Disney movie, that I can think of. This is not a Disney movie. A lot of people mistook this movie for a Disney movie. It was not. But what it had in its favor were two great voice actors, which in my opinion really helped make the movie what it is, in addition to the great, great animation of the actual rainforest that the movie takes place in. So the two voice actors that this movie has, Tim Curry, who voices the main villain, Hexus, and then of course Robin Williams, who voices one of the protagonist character's name Batty. The name is Batty. Dun 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 dun. Anyway, he's got a great rap. It's awesome. The essential premise, Fern Gully is set in an Australian rainforest inhabited by fairies, including Krista, who's our main character. Krista accidentally shrinks a young logger named Zach to the size of a fairy. Together, they rally the fairies and animals of the rainforest to protect their home from the loggers and Hexus, a malevolent pollution entity. Doesn't sound very scary, but when you see the way the animators brought Hexus to life, especially near the end of the movie, where he goes from being kind of a scary ball of mist or smoke to a full-out oil-like skeleton with like flames and shit on like the inside of his chest, it's so scary at the end. But yeah, he even like starts off as like a pile of oil, and he's a little bit creepy then. Then his creepiness factor goes up a little bit more, like I said, when he's the smoke slash mist slash steam. And then it goes full-blown ham, hard as a mother, when he turns into like Hexus skeleton version Hexus. It's so creepy near the end. And then the music's on point too. And then Tim Curry, his voice acting just adds a whole nother dimension to the character as well, especially his laugh. And also there's a great eerie song in it called Toxic Love, which is kind of a fun groovy song, but when he's morphing into like the smoke monster from just being oil, it takes on a little bit more of a sinister tone. Even though the lyrics are kind of jazzy and groovy, it's still kind of creepy to see him morph into like a more menacing guy who can encompass a bigger surface area, essentially. So there's 2 articles about this movie. The first is called Nightmare Fuel / Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest. That's from tvtropes.org. Another article is called Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest. Tim Curry's villain was too intense for kids. So in this article, it apparently says that Tim Curry had to go back in to revoice some of his lines because it was originally a little bit too scary the way he performed it. So he basically had to tone down his delivery of some of the lines to make it a little bit easier for some kids and some people to digest, which is insane because I think his portrayal is kind of scary, especially when he turns into the skeleton version of Hexus. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. Another scary part of the movie, Batty's rap, if you really take a hard listen at the lyrics, it's all about Batty being experimented on by humans. In fact, some of the lines from the song, they used and abused me, battered and bruised me, red wires, green wires, stuck 'em right through me. And then there's this part where he's impersonating a doctor that must have been working on him, and he goes, "Get me another one, get me another animal." And it's like a very creepy like shadow scene where like it's Batty in like the shadows and he looks like a different person, like an actual person who's experimenting on Batty himself. So off-putting. When you really listen to the lyrics, it's like, whoa, holy shit, this is dark. This is dark. So yeah, as I've been saying, there's a reason it's here on the list, and yeah, I do love this movie, by the way. If you haven't seen it, you gotta see it. It's so good. Next up, a little bit different. It's not necessarily an animated movie. It's more of a Jim Henson-style movie, and that's because it is a Jim Henson movie. It is The Dark Crystal from the year 1982, and this one I have not seen in years. So this is based off of pure memory alone. I watched it a lot as a kid. I had it on VHS. There are some movies you might have wondered why I've left off on my list. I've got 2 more to talk about after this one, but I will explain why I have left certain things off that might have scared most kids, but maybe I didn't watch it as a kid, and that's why it's not here. So we will get there when we get there, but I definitely watched this movie a lot as a kid because, like I said, I owned it, and it was something I threw on every now and then, and I can't even remember how to pronounce the name of the antagonist in this movie. I think it's the Skeksis? I think that's it. So the overall tone of the entire movie is very dark, very bleak, kind of like some aspects of other movies on my list, but this one, pretty much the entire tone is very dark, very depressing. So on Wikipedia, I found this little excerpt about the antagonists, the main villains from The Dark Crystal. It says, Skeksis are described by concept artist Brian Froud as part reptile, part predatory bird, part dragon. Jim Henson said that in development of the Skeksis, I hope I'm saying that right, by the way, he said the creators drew inspiration from the 7 deadly sins. What's more terrifying than that? Come on, that's perfect for inspiration for a super creepy character, or set of characters. The basic plot of the movie: Jen, raised by the noble race called the Mystics, has been told that he is the last survivor of his own race, the Gelflings. He sets out to try to find a shard of the Dark Crystal, a powerful gem that once provided balance to the universe. After the crystal was broken, the evil Skeksis used sinister means to gain control. Jen believes that he can repair the Dark Crystal and bring back peace to the world if he can only find the remaining shard. There's also an article about this movie called "I've Been Deeply Terrified of the Dark Crystal for 23 Years" by Justin Kirkland. And then he has in the subtitle, I guess not the subtitle, the subheader of the article says, "Puppets, man." I will say the puppet design, not just of the Skeksis, which are the main villains as I've referenced, but the other characters, some of the other characters, like there's this witch, and there's this creature with like long bat-looking like wing legs. Those creatures, the designs of those puppets, kind of scary, to be honest, even though they're not really necessarily supposed to be scary characters. Next movie on my list, Goosebumps! And yes, I'm considering this a movie because it was released as a two-parter TV episode. However, they released it officially as a VHS where they put the two different parts of the episode together, so I am considering this an official movie, so it can officially be counted on my top 10 creepiest kids movies list. And sorry, the air conditioner was just going on, I could not get it to turn off, and it finally snapped off. But you might have guessed that Goosebumps was going to be on my list because I am wearing haunted mask, creepy green Goosebumps earrings, and I just kicked the camera. I'm a professional here, I'm a professional, but not really. Alright, hopefully I fixed it okay. It's still a little shaky. Okay, so back to the haunted mask. Essentially, the main premise: Carly Beth discovers a creepy lifelike mask and decides to use it to scare the boys who constantly tease and humiliate her. This was released in 1995. Like I said, it was part of the Goosebumps TV series, but I did own it on VHS. I will say, the mask design was superb. They did the best job ever of bringing the mask from the book, because of course all Goosebumps TV show episodes are based on the books by R.L. Stine, and they did such a great job at actually bringing the mask to life and making it look so scary. But even on top of that, Carly Beth's voice when she has the mask on is very, very spooky and off-putting. I don't like her voice while she's wearing the mask. I think they did a great job at making it super scary for kids. This was one of the movies that scared me the most as a kid. The idea of not being able to get a mask off your face, it being stuck on your face, it feels like a type of scare that you could really buy into. Of course, it's not really realistic for a mask to really get attached to your face because it's haunted or evil, but I think there is a chance for a mask getting stuck on your face just because the mask doesn't fit right. So to me, that's the kind of realistic spin on the scare, but none of us were thinking that we were watching it. We were more thinking about how freaking scary that mask was and how we didn't want to put it on and get stuck with that really off-putting face looking back at us in the mirror. I thought it was such a well-done adaptation from the book, and I honestly think it's one of the best Goosebump episodes that they ever made. Not a lot of them scare me, but this one did scare me, and I rewatched it not that long ago. Not only does it hold up scare factor wise, because I do still think the teeth in the mask and it looking like it's really a part of her face, they did such a great job with the makeup and the prosthetics of it all. So it's that part holds up for sure. But what also holds up is the autumn vibes. So if you're looking for something to rewatch and it's been a while, check out the Haunted Mask episodes because, man, the leaves blowing around, she's like frolicking in the woods. It's so appropriate for spooky season, and I love it because of that as well. Now I will say, the designs of the other masks, she sees really hideous looking masks in the Halloween store that she goes into, and even the guy who runs this Halloween shop that Carly Beth interacts with is super creepy. I think he's like one of the creepiest parts of the entire two-parter episode. But the other mask designs, they are also very gross, eerie, disturbing, whatever you want to say. However, there's a part where they like float around and like chase after Carly Beth, and I think that part has not held up because it's like CGI and it looks really bad because I mean it was back in 1995, so you gotta excuse that part, but the rest of the episode in my opinion holds up. So yes, it might be time for you to revisit it if it's been a while, and if you haven't seen it then you definitely have to, because there are some parts that are spooky even if it's your first time as an adult seeing it. Last but not least, a movie that has a lot of spooky, creepy, disturbing parts. However, it's definitely the most depressing movie on my list. This is The Never-Ending Story from 1984. And like I said, the entire tone is creepy and also depressing. So it's not just because it's got the spooky vibes, it's just got a bleakness to it that I think adds to the creep factor. So there's the whole part where the horse Artex freaking sinks, and it's the saddest thing ever. It still makes me sad when I think about it. There's the Gamork, I think that's how you say it, Gamork? Anyway, it's like a wolf-like creature. There are the oracles that like have laser eyes coming after you, like pew, pew. But also their boobs are sticking out, which I thought was really weird to have those boobs sticking out in a kid's movie. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. That is scary in a different way when you're watching that as a kid and you're like, what? Like, why is this here? I don't know. Anyway, I didn't really like pay attention to it that much as a kid, but as an adult looking back, I was like, what? Anyway, so all of that is very, very just bleak. And then the nothing. So the nothing is taking over. So it says, on his way to school, Bastian ducks into a bookstore to avoid bullies, sneaking away with a book called The Never-Ending Story. Bastian begins reading it in the school attic. The novel is about Fantasia, a fantasy land threatened by the nothing, a darkness that destroys everything. And that's part of the depressing part of it, but also the scary part of it. The nothing is both depressing and scary. And it's like, who isn't scared of a big nothingness taking over life? I mean, and then you blink and you look around and there's nothing there. So to me, it works in a multitude of ways as like this big bad thing that's happening in Fantasia. So there are articles about this as well. One of them is Ways the Never-Ending Story is way, way more messed up and weird than you remember, by Laura Radford, or Lyra Radford? I'm sorry, I don't know which one. And then the other article is from Tor.com called Why You Should Watch the Never-Ending Story as an Adult by Leah Schnellbeck. I think that's how you say her last name. But yeah, both articles, I scrolled through them, very interesting stuff, especially the why you should watch it as an adult, because it's more than just talking about the creepy factors of the movie. It's talking about how, oh, as an adult, we can relate to this part of the movie a little bit more. So a part of that article actually says, The Never-Ending Story was a classic children's fantasy of the 1980s, right up there with The Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, Legend, and The Last Unicorn, in creating a latticework of terrifying puppets, questionable animation, and traumatizing storylines. It definitely had traumatizing parts. Like I said, Artex sticks out as number one, but also that creepy Gamork wolf guy chasing Artex and Atreyu throughout all of Fantasia is also very off-putting. But it did have some magical moments, like the song, the music in it. Of course, that was referenced recently in Stranger Things. That became a whole big thing again, where they were singing The Never-Ending Story. But my favorite part is when Bastian gets to take a ride on Falkor and chase the bullies and literally like scream out in triumph, yeah! Yeah! It's like probably one of the best screaming scenes in any movie. It's one of the best feel-good, like, turnaround scenes ever. I love that scene so much. I used to, as a kid, when I saw that scene, jump up and go, yeah, with Bastian. But I gotta say, I freaking love that movie. It's a classic. It never gets old. Alright, so those were the official 10 movies on my top 10 creepiest kids movies list. However, I do have a quick list of honorable mentions. I know that people are specifically scoffing about one movie I left off of my list, Return to Oz from 1985. I do think this movie is creepy. It deserves to be on a top creepiest movies list, well, specifically kids movies list. The reason it's not on my list is because I didn't really watch it as a kid. I watched it as a young adult. So I feel like since I didn't really have the experience of being super traumatized by it as a kid, I couldn't really put it on this list because although it was a creepy kids movie for a lot of kids who ended up watching it when they were actually children, it wasn't for me. So that's why it's just an honorable mention. But of course, it's in the honorable mentions because I have to recognize that, yeah, it is creepy, it is eerie. Next up, probably one of the scariest and craziest scenes in all of animation history, the Night on Bald Mountain scene from the movie Fantasia. The movie Fantasia is from 1940, and this is probably not only one of the scariest sequences of animation ever, but also one of the most elegant in a way, because it's very beautifully done, even though it's a literal sequence of a demon, like dancing around on a mountain and all these other demons and creatures of the night, but then the way it ends is kind of peaceful, and so it comes full circle. But yeah, the actual part where Chernabog, who's the demon, rises from the mountain, it is just terrifying, so I had to shout that one out. Another shout out, Coraline from 2009, lots of creepy parts, especially with the other parents, where she goes into like that kind of topsy-turvy version of her own home. The next honorable mention, The Time Bandits from 1981. I have talked about this movie before. It is not a horror movie, but it feels like a horror movie when you were a kid watching this, and it's got maybe the bleakest ending of any kids movie that I ever saw back in the day. I always thought that the ending was super bleak, and I was like, what the hell? The villain's creepy. Overall, it's also a very strange movie. You're like, this is such a weird movie. It makes me feel weird watching it. So yeah, and I still get that vibe today. If you happen to watch the show The Goldbergs, which just ended like a year or two ago, they used to have, in one of the characters' bedrooms, they had Adam, the main character, have a Time Bandits poster in his bedroom for like many seasons. It might have been for like most of the whole entire show, and the show ran for like 9 or 10 years or something like that. So yeah, I love how they had that poster up for so long. And last but not least, a movie that I really need to rewatch, because all I remember is the villain was super scary. So The Black Cauldron from 1985. I'm really thinking that I'm gonna make this a priority for Old School April in 2024. So we will see what I think about it when I revisit it, but I wanted to give it a shout out because I know a lot of people say that the villain is very scary, especially for like a Disney villain. And a lot of weird things were taking place at the Disney Animation Studios at that time. It was kind of a failure for them, and there was some tension in the animation department during that time, so that is why the movie, it didn't really go very smoothly production-wise. However, it did apparently kind of well on overseas release, so that's something to note. So, those are all my honorable mentions, and I did want to make a special note and say the #1 creepiest movie I ever watched when I was a kid, but it's not a kid's movie, that's why it's not on this list, is Watership Down. It's an animated movie, so lots of parents rented this movie because it was animated, and they thought it was a family movie or a kids-appropriate movie. It was not. Bloody bunnies, bloody tunnels, rabbits ripping each other's throat out, freaking snares that like basically choke a bunny out. It's legit terrifying. It's still one of the scariest movies I ever watched, even as an adult, just because of the way some of the scenes transpire, and you see the bunnies like imagining, almost like envisioning these tunnels being filled in with dirt, and then the bunnies are suffocating. It's one of the most horrific scenes in any movie ever. Animated or non-animated, aka live action movie. It doesn't matter which. That scene from Watership Down is one of the scariest movie scenes ever. Period. So yeah, I couldn't put it on the list though because it's not technically a kid's movie. It was an adult movie, but a lot of people actually ended up accidentally watching it as a kid, including me. So I just wanted to give a special shout out about that and why it's not on the list. But yeah, if I had to rank the movies, that would be my #1 in terms of scare factor that I actually saw as a kid and was the most creeped out by as a kid. Alright guys, that was my list. I know it was long, as usual. I did this in honor of Halloween. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you don't mind these movie-themed, TV-themed, nostalgia-themed videos. I really like doing them, and I try to do them a little bit more around April, and also a little bit more around Halloween time. To me, there's a lot of nostalgia associated with Halloween as a holiday in general, and also Old School April is my readathon, like I said, in April, and that's when I concentrate on celebrating nostalgia as a whole, so that's when I'll be talking more about nostalgic movies and shows, but also nostalgic books, or books set in the past as well. Alright guys, so if you're interested, make sure you try to stay tuned for deets about next April, because yes, it will be returning, as I've hinted before. For this time though, that is finally it for me. Till next time, you guys know what you can do. Keep on killing it. Thanks guys, thanks for watching. Bye!